Hey everyone, I'm Rick Zanotti, and welcome to Life Edge, because life just doesn't have to be mediocre. I am joined today by my good friend and co-host, Dr. Susan Nash. Susan, how are you?
I'm great, and today we have a first. For the first time, we have 3 guests, and they are women in science.
Also known as the Susan Bunch, right? We're in that kind of formation today. Here we go.
This show is sponsored by Relay Corporation. Digital learning development, media development, corporate video, management consulting, and more. Visit us at www.relate.com. Thanks.
And also joining us in that lower right position, that's Harold Mugliati. He's our video producer. Here we go. Susan, do the honors.
Well, I'm really happy to have wonderful guests today, and each is a special scientist in her own right. We'll have a chance to find out what inspired her to pursue science. So on our upper left corner, we have Rachelle Kernen, and hi, Rachelle. And we have Amanda Pascali. Hi. In our center position. I'm sorry, right-hand position. And then in the middle, we have Nicole Wagoner.
Yeah.
My notes here in the wrong order. But anyway, so great to have you here. And I'm really intrigued by how each of you got started. And also, I'd love to explore the connections between science and art and artistic endeavors, which can include music. So anyway, thinking of that, Amanda, would you like to start? How did you get interested in science and specifically geology?
Hi, thanks so much, Susan. Thank you for having me. So I am the publicity director for the AAPG Women's Network. And really the focus of what I do as publicity director is to bring to light the stories of inspiring women in geoscientists, in geoscience, to increase visibility and inspire the next generation of geoscientists. So, my reason for pursuing science is the same reason that I pursue art as a singer-songwriter, and that is, I am in love with searching for the truth, speaking the truth, and writing about the truth. And I think that all good art is made about the truth, which is also what science is fundamentally based on.
Oh, that's fascinating. This is really interesting. And what type of songs do you write?
Primarily songs that deal with social issues, from a young age, I was always driven to be a messenger of my family's diaspora and my family's history. I'm the daughter of 2 immigrants, and my mom is a huge inspiration because she is a woman in STEM as well. So, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, that's great. So I'd like to ask Nicole the same questions. Like, what inspired you to become a geoscientist? And do you see any connections between the work that you've done in geoscience and other areas of your life?
Thanks, Susan, and thank you for having me on today. What brought me to geology, I guess I always really liked science. I always enjoyed thinking about problems and trying to come up with solutions and thinking through the puzzles. And when I was a kid, I actually kind of was set up in geology without even really realizing it. There was 2 geologists that lived down the street, and they put on a rock and minerals club in the mornings before school started. So that was kind of my first endeavor into geology from an early age, and I didn't even really know that I had that much of an interest. And it kind of all started from there, and when I went to college and tried to figure out what I wanted to do and what I wanted to study, I knew I wanted to be in science, and I knew I liked the outdoors and thinking through problems and those kinds of things. So I kind of was looking at my options, trying to figure it out, and my mom actually knew me better than myself, right? And pointed me in the direction of geology. She had a feeling that was something that I might like, not being a geologist herself, but just knowing me and what my interests were. So I kind of stumbled into it, but love it at the same time. So, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I'm so impressed too that the mothers have played such an important role too. So that's wonderful. So Rachelle, what is your story about geology and other areas of your life?
Sure. Thank you, Susan. So for me, it was, I've always been fascinated with the outdoors. I grew up playing outside. I grew up in Wisconsin, and I started collecting rocks when I was like 3 years old, and my mom would find them in my pockets when she'd do the laundry. So I've always just had an affiliation for rocks. I didn't necessarily know that I was going to be a geologist, but I knew that I was going to do some sort of science always. For me, we are camping, or when I was growing up, we'd have family field trips and vacations, and they would be camping up north, like around the Lake Superior region in Canada. And I was just fascinated with the rocks up there. Once I realized that I could study and I could see similar things that were millions of years, like that whole connection to how the present is the past. So like one of the geology laws, that was something that just resonated with me and I became passionate about. For me, there's just something special about being outside and hiking and just being within nature. And I just followed my passion. Basically, I've always just followed my passions. I would say that my parents have always encouraged me to do that as well.
Well, that's really fascinating. And one thing I've noticed that, well, when you're saying the present is the key to the past, and so understanding the processes by being able to look at depositional systems, et cetera, rivers, things. Now it seems almost like we're looking at the past as a key to the present in order to understand what's happening and what could happen in terms of climate change, et cetera. Have you thought about that at all?
Yeah, I thought about it from a research perspective. So when I was an undergraduate in geology, I studied the Endymion mass extinction, and I looked at the sediment. So right before the extinction, the coral reefs and the diversity was really high in all the animals and the creatures. And then once you had that mass extinction, earliest part of the Triassic time period, everything was just, you saw one type of fossil. You didn't see it, the diversity. You didn't see the coral reefs. So for me, that's something that I have to really be good stewards of our environment, because we don't want to lose our ecosystems that we see today. The same thing will happen. It happens over and over and over in Earth's history.
It's a really good point. Nicole and Amanda, have you thought about this? Do you have any thoughts on that? Unraveling the present based on the past?
Yeah, kind of like Rachelle said, I mean, that's kind of a key law in geology, is using the past to understand the present processes in an environment. So that's how we approach geology all the time. So it's definitely on the forefront of your mind, and kind of looking at those processes in real life and in real time, and trying to figure out what's going to happen in the future, and what impact we have in that future.
That's great. And Amanda, I really liked what you were saying about truth. From a scientific perspective, how do you approach truth? And that's kind of a philosophical question, but interested in your thoughts on that.
I kind of think that, I guess the question that you're asking seems a bit unnatural to me, because I think that science wouldn't exist without truth. Science is truth. And so any science that is not based on truth is not science. Then it's belief. Because the difference between believing something and knowing something is whether there's evidence behind it. If there's no evidence behind something, then you believe it. But if there is evidence behind something, you either accept it or just ignore the fact that it's true, which a lot of people do now and have done throughout history. People liked to ignore that the Earth revolves around the sun, and today people like to ignore that climate change is actually happening. But at the end of the day, the good thing about science is that it's true whether or not we believe in it.
That's a really good answer.
I had a question.
I know that.
Question for Amanda. It does seem like while the singing and songwriting might at surface level seem like a somewhat odd combination with geoscience, I think it kind of makes sense to me where with a creative profession doing something that's cosmopolitan like geology, where you end up oftentimes going around a lot of different places in the world and meeting people of different cultures and sort of that sort of thing. I'm not sure how much have you traveled much in your research and work? Has that influenced your songwriting and that sort of thing?
Yeah, for sure. They're very much connected for me, and that was kind of my motivation to go into geology. When I was little, I loved to look at maps, and I loved to look at the part of the maps where the map just seemed to end, the very top and the very bottom. And I had this dream of visiting the isolated corners of the Earth in the only way that I knew possible, which was to become a scientist. And I think geology is one of those fields of science that benefits most from creative thinking. Because unlike some other fields of science, I think geology it's kind of like this four-dimensional puzzle for which we have only 1% of the pieces. And so that other 99%, I think that our path to understanding it lies in thinking creatively and thinking outside of the box. And so that's why I think being an artist has helped me a lot in geology. And I'm thankful to have gone to the University of Houston, where I met a lot of incredible professors that, I was given a lot of opportunities to do field work in some of the strangest places in the world. Like, I've been very close to the North Pole doing field work, and in the deserts of West Texas, and also on a ship in the middle of the South Atlantic Ocean doing marine geophysics research, mapping the bottom of the seafloor. So, yeah, of course, and the people that I meet along the way inspire me just as much as the science that I'm doing as part of those expeditions.
Now, this is a question for any one of you. There aren't enough women in the sciences, never really have been. There seem to be more now than before, but not by much. And it depends on which science. Why do you think women don't get into science as much as they could or should?
I can start.
Sure.
So we're actually writing a manuscript about this very topic. And if you look at the statistics, women are graduating, it's equal. So from high school, women, they excel, they get the same grades, they do everything, basically the same. They graduate from their undergrad, not quite at 50, but almost 50. And it is my honest belief that from there, women are essentially bullied out of the field. They're not treated well. They're asked to do work that is viewed as being less important. and more of like a service work, maybe some would consider, but really it's the backbone of the data analytical process. And I think that women are not given equal recognition. And I think it's rooted in misogyny in this country and all over the world. Some places are better than others, but in my heart of hearts, I really do believe that women are treated badly, not always, but a lot of times, and they're pushed out.
A little bit of that good old boy network problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Rachelle was saying, some of the bigger problems that we see are actually getting into the workforce and then retention in the workforce. That's where the numbers tend to start to drop off pretty significantly. So that tends to be where that tipping point is.
If I may say something as well, I think that one thing that we're trying to address, Rachelle, and Nicole, is the lack of visibility of women in science, because it's been, scientifically proven from studies by Microsoft and others that when young women and girls see women in science and they see role models, they are more likely to pursue pro-science career aspirations. Because if you never see women in a field that you are interested in or that you excel in at school, perhaps you get good grades, but you never see any role models in that field, you start to think that perhaps that's not a place where you belong. And Rachelle mentioned girls getting the same grades as boys in high school. Actually, they statistically do better in math and science, the same or better than boys. And that was definitely my high school experience. I wasn't the best student, but the best students in my classes were girls, and yet they still didn't pursue science even when they went to college. So Rachelle and Nicole addressed the problem of when women get out of college and they go into the workforce and they're kind of bullied. But I think that the problem also occurs earlier when they're going to college, and yet sometimes they refrain from choosing STEM majors in school.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm older. When I studied geology at the University of Oklahoma, that definitely played into it, but even more so in the first years of professional life. And what happens is sometimes you find yourself becoming so desensitized to it that you're not even quite aware that oppression is happening. And I don't know if you see that still happening, that it becomes internalized almost.
I agree 100% with you, Susan. I think every woman in her 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond sort of awakening in this self-awareness process, and depending on where you are on that journey is how sort of your viewpoint is. And for me, I really became aware of it mid-20s mostly, and now it's like sometimes it stares you so badly in the face it's hard to to imagine, and it's like, how am I the only person that sees this? Or it's difficult. So I feel for the women that maybe aren't as far along in their awareness journey as others. And I feel that part of my role, and I'm always willing to talk to women, of just be a safe person that can listen, because I have gone through that process personally.
How much do you think has to do with the school system? Not encouraging women to stay in the sciences or to pursue that dream? Aside from other issues, what about the school system itself?
No,
I think, I didn't want to jump in a second time, 2 in a row, but I think actually, from what I can see, is I think a lot of times women are exploited in the college system. or they can't exploit it. They're told maybe in their undergraduate, like, oh, you can have this great career, you can do all these great things. They're really pushed up. And then once they get in maybe the master's or the workforce or start getting more towards their late 20s, early 30s, it's almost like, okay, you're too old, or you did what we needed you to do. Now get out of the way so your male counterparts can take over. It's time for you to go have a baby or have a family, or oh, you might get pregnant soon, so we don't want that that charge to our company's insurance, or whatever it may be. But I think that young women are drawn to it because of the opportunity, and I truly believe that in many cases they are exploited and then thrown away and discarded when they're of no use anymore. They'll cost the company money, or they're seen as being a problem, not agreeing with their supervisor or their manager when they're seeking the truth, and maybe that doesn't agree with upper management's political agenda or something like that. So be very problematic for some people.
I was kind of interested to ask Rachelle. Earlier, you mentioned that in the workforce, in geology, men and women end up getting put into different roles, and the roles that women are put into are undervalued. As someone with not as much experience in the field of geology, what would be some examples of that? I believe you mentioned some things about like data collecting and data analytics.
Sure. So there are a lot of positions that, for example, only require an undergraduate degree, and you can go into a company, an oil company or a service company as like a technician, a tech role. And a lot of these people do the data management housekeeping, or they're doing the heavy lifting of like the sort of the basics, ABCs, nuts and bolts of geology. But the thing is, if that isn't done well, the rest of what, ever's doing, the higher level geologists, they can't do their early unless you have a solid foundation. So I see these, if you will, technician roles as being the foundation of many companies, and a lot of times they have a ceiling, a salary ceiling. They're not given support to get secondary degrees so they can grow in pay and prestige, if you will, in academic system or in a corporate system, get into upper management. I mean, a lot of these people, a lot of women and minorities are in those roles. So, and I don't think that's good. I think, every company should be providing the person, if they so seek it, to have an opportunity to not have a glass ceiling.
I find that pretty interesting because a lot of the people from the field that we've interviewed the last few years have talked a lot about how data analytics, based on data that's been collected from well sites and various other places, is going to play a really huge role in the industry in the coming years, because there'll be the need to figure out and predict where wells will be, or how they'll be shaped and that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it seems to me like that'll become more and more obvious as time goes on.
Absolutely.
So what would you recommend for say a person who's in an undergraduate? Now I'll ask Nicole this. What do you guys see as what do you see as having a pathway for a female who's considering science? What type of classes should she take considering geoscience?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's the geoscience curriculum, but geoscience seems to be changing so much, and as you guys were just kind of talking about, with data analytics becoming a big part, and sustainability and renewables becoming a big part, so it's kind of ever evolving and ever changing. So I think that more than anything, to me, to be a really good geologist, I think being well-rounded and well-versed in a lot of different subjects and topics is really important. that would be kind of the advice that I would give, I think. Find
That
those
makes
role models,
sense.
find those sponsors and mentors, and hold on to them.
I like that. Amanda, do you have any thoughts on that, or possible
I guess,
directions?
as Nicole mentioned, I think the, geoscience is changing a lot. One thing that I noticed I just graduated with my Bachelor of Science in Geology, and the geology school that I went to, while it was good, and I learned a lot of fundamental things about conducting research and doing field work, I think geology as a whole needs to move into the 21st century in terms of how we teach geology and our methods. And so I think that if I could encourage girls who are interested in science to focus on something in geology, it would be helping move the field towards a more sustainable future, both in terms of technical things, like, for example, I would advise girls to maybe take those optional electives that are about computing, coding, machine learning, and those types of things, because, our ideal future looks like half and half women and men in high-level science careers, but also a more of a fluency with technology in geology. I don't know any other field of science that is so reluctant to move into the 21st century. Not to put the field down or anything, but I think I would advise girls to choose those optional electives in computing and coding and machine learning and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's great. Really nice perspectives. So I have a kind of quirky question. Okay, so I know we've all had interesting experiences in the field, and so I was really interested in finding out what you consider to be maybe your most memorable or surprising or unique experience in the field, doing field mapping or work. So, Nicole, do you want to start?
So I guess maybe one of my favorite field experiences was our trip to Greece. We got to take a class when I was at University of Texas at Austin, where we got to go to Greece and travel around some of the Greek islands and study the geology and look at the geology and map it out. And it was just a very picturesque place and a very fun place to go do that trip at. And the people and the food and the culture and the geology, everything was awesome and fantastic. And so I guess that would probably be my favorite vacation that I've done so far.
That sounds great. Makes me want to travel. So, Amanda, what is? You've had some really interesting experiences.
Yeah, so I think one of my most transformative experiences in my geology education was also one of the most embarrassing experiences that I've ever had. And it was my first ever geology field trip that I went on, and kind of it was my second year of school. It was field methods class, and I was not yet declared as a geology major, so we went on this field trip, and I dropped my compass in a river, and the river was very deep, and it was early February, so it was very cold, and I told my professor that I dropped my compass, and that was a very bad thing, because we still had the entire trip left, and I had no compass, which is essentially what you need to do all of the mapping that was part of that field trip. And so he said, "Can you see the compass at the bottom of the river?" And I said, "Yes, I can see it." And he's like, "Okay, I'll go get it for you." And so my professor jumped in a river to get my compass for me, and the river was freezing. And when he gave the compass back to me, it had essentially fallen apart. And that night, I was sitting in my tent alone, trying to put this compass back together. And I thought of myself as, I thought to myself, I'm not cut out for this. Like, I'm not cut out to be a geologist, and I can't do this. And when I was putting this compass back together, the rest of the trip, I completed the mapping assignments and everything like that. And then later on in the semester, I was awarded a full scholarship to go to field camp in Svalbard, Norway, next to the North Pole, by that same professor that jumped in the river to get me my compass, because he saw that I was able to come back from that experience. I was able to fix the compass by myself. And I think that was these uncomfortable experiences are the ones that, help me grow the most. And if I would go back and tell myself that right now I would be telling you guys this story, I would never have believed it.
That's wonderful. I love that. Rachelle, have you had an intriguing experience?
Yeah, I did all my master's and PhD field work in the Indian outback, in the middle of nowhere. It's more remote than any place that I can really think of in the lower 48 here in the States. And one story in particular, I was doing some field mapping during a mouse plague, and yeah. So yeah, I had to sleep in a car because in the middle of the night you'd wake up and they'd like find their way in your hair, in your sleeping bag. It was horrible. They're all over, everywhere, underneath the tent pad. So I ended up having to sleep in the car for the week because I just couldn't do it after the first couple nights. So that was interesting.
I think mice are attracted to geologists. I remember my dad's a geologist, and he would do field. I remember he was doing some well sitting in Wyoming. He came back and he talked about how he was in the geologist trailer, and then they had some infestation of mice, and they got into his hair. Like, ew.
Well, we're about at the end of our time, but we do have one more question that we ask our guests on Life Edge. Who wants to do the honors?
Susan?
Okay, so the name of our show is Life Edge. So our question is, what do you think it is in your life that has given you an edge and made it possible for you to do the things that you've done? So we'll start from left to right. How about Rachelle, would you like to start?
Really stubborn. I want to succeed, and I want to be happy. I want to succeed. I want to be helpful and kind. So probably just very stubborn.
That's the first time I think I've heard that answer. That's good.
It's a pretty good one.
Nicole?
For me, I think I would say persistence. I've always persisted at everything that I've done, and I remember back in high school there was something that one of my coaches said that I think she told my dad, "Oh, she's never gonna be able to do that," and he was like, "Well, do you know Nicole? Obviously not that well." Because it took her a while, but she'll get there.
That's great.
That sounds a lot like stubborn.
Matter of framing.
Amanda.
Yes,
I think for me, just incredible mentors and being able to constantly put myself in situations where I am surrounded by people that are more intelligent than me. So, I'm doing that very thing right now, and I'm very lucky to be working with Rachelle and Nicole, and always be learning from them and other, inspiring women in geoscience. So, they always say, surround yourself with people who are more intelligent than you, and that is exactly what I think I've been able to do, and what gives me an edge.
Now, I'll leave you with that last comment, Amanda, and this is for all of you. there's a lot of people in business who don't want people who are better, smarter, or have more tendencies to succeed than they do. And as a result, it may not have anything to do with being a woman, a guy, or anything else. It has to do with pettiness. People who are afraid of other people who may be better. We see this all the time in business, and it doesn't matter whether it's a woman, a guy. We just see it a lot. There's people who don't want to surround themselves with people who may be better, or they don't want to manage someone who they think is better because they're threatened for their own jobs or careers or whatever else. It's a shame that happens, but it happens a lot.
That's very true.
Anyway, I've been in management for a long time, and I've seen it all too often. And it's just, if you don't want good people around you, then you're not going to succeed, period. You take everybody down with you rather than bring people up.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, like Amanda said, we're very blessed to be working with this group at AAPG Women's Network to help push everything forward. And like they said, and you said, you got to surround yourself with excellent people, and they'll help you keep pushing everything forward. And we all feel like we're lucky to have that right now. So.
Well, we're glad you guys could make it on the show, and thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing with us. And we will see everyone next week on the show. If you have any questions for any of the ladies here today or any of us, you can leave them in the show notes below. This is on LinkedIn. We're actually live on LinkedIn right now, but it's also on Facebook and it's also on YouTube. So you could go any of those places and ask questions, and people will get back to you. Have a good one, everyone. And we have one more show for this season, and then we're done until next year. Let's hope 2021 is a better year for everyone. Have a good one. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you. Okay.